most people. So who somebody shouted out? Who? Allegedly Margaret Mead, although actually when I tried to find out about this, because I thought it was Margaret Mead for a long time, turns out she may not have said it. It's actually possibly, it's not in her published work. And raise your hand again if you've actually printed out that phrase and hung it over in your office. Yeah, so quite a few people have. So, you know, I think one thing that, if you want to know what civic engagement means in practice, it's whatever draws a bunch of people together who are likely to print out that phrase and put it in their offices. But let me ask you this question. Was Margaret Mead, or whoever wrote that, correct? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. True or false? True. Okay, I hear both true and false, and let's take a few minutes over this. It would be great if you would raise your hand or just shout out why you're saying it's true or false. Raise your hand and I'll call on you so that you feel comfortable. Yes?
Well, I would say without a small group, you don't get to the tipping point of a large enough group to make change, but without a large enough group to hit change.
So it's not sufficient.
True and false.
You're saying it's
necessary but not sufficient.
Necessary but not sufficient, right? Which it makes her not quite right. I just wouldn't know because she says it's the only thing that ever has.
Right.
Great. More comments because there's a lot of angles on this. Yes.
I'll say true because I think a small group is going to be tenacious and will commit to the long haul, and it's that longevity of the effort.
Okay. And so you're emphasizing the small group, that part of it especially, as that's what you need for tenacity. Is that fair? Yes.
I want to say false. I'm thinking of individual dictators or monarchs who have the power to make change by fiat. There's got to still be some kind of group agreeing to support their dictatorship. And
yeah.
Also that you have to think about change for what we have to go through as the work rather than change for better.
So there's actually I don't know if everybody can hear, but there's 2 points there which are both really important. One is, it's not literally the only thing that changes the world. What about dictators? What about good but not small forces? What about the US Army? Doesn't that change the world? What about Hurricane Katrina, which is not a small group of thoughtful and committed people, but it did change the world. And the second thing is, she doesn't say anything about for the better. So it's only a kind of hidden implication, but is she saying that when you get a bunch of thoughtful, committed citizens together, it will change the world for the better? Because if she said that, would you agree? Because I can think of, in part, I can think of some bad groups of thoughtful, committed citizens, right? Who are sometimes quite effective. So we're raising a bunch of doubts, and yet, well, can anybody speak up for the quote? Because actually, I'm not meaning to pick on it. It is inspirational, and there's probably some reasons for it. Does anybody else want to say anything positive about it before we move on? Yes.
I think she's very right with the amount of commitment. Anybody who wants to do anything or change anything requires a commitment to that goal. So no matter what the goal is, it's good or bad, or if it's a small group or a large group, to affect any change, you need a commitment to it. So.
And so you're really emphasizing the word committed.
Absolutely.
Right. But also, we might want to build a lot into the idea of thoughtful too, because maybe we can rule out some of the bad groups of citizens by saying that they're not thoughtful. So I think Margaret Mead is a great starting point, but it's not. And again, I'm not picking on her, especially since she may not have even said these words. But and it's very short, and it's a bumper sticker. But we do need to ask a lot more questions, and I would boil them down to 3 big ones. When and under what circumstances can a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens change the world? Secondly, how can we make them effective? And third, when is it good that they do that? Yeah, I skipped a little point that I sometimes make, which is, you can actually spend time with a group picking on that Margaret Mead quote long enough that people start to agree with an alternative quotation, which I don't know who said this, but I've heard it said, never doubt the capacity of large groups of ignorant and selfish people to squelch good ideas and make the world worse. So those are probably equally valid. But we need to move past the generalizations and actually thinking about how can small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens make the world better. And that requires thinking about three things together, I believe: facts, strategies, and values. And they're really inseparable: facts, strategies, and values. You have to have them all on the table at once. As a quick digression, let me say, I think that's really, really rare in universities, to put those things together. It's not really in our courses, it's not really in our writing. And there's some reasons for that. I could go on about the reasons for a long time, but I won't. But I'll just throw two out. One is that anybody who's been educated in a social science or science discipline in the last 50 years is taught to be highly skeptical of the influence of values on their findings. So the values are supposed to be biases or opinions. The facts are supposed to be true. So you're not supposed to have values, but everybody knows you do. So you treat those as limitations. You disclose those. You say, I think this is the facts, but I might be wrong because I have these values. That's not the way to think about it at all. Values are some of the most important things, but they have to be good values. If your research is motivated by humane, egalitarian, inclusive values, that's a good thing about it. If it's not motivated by those values, that's a bad thing. But the whole mindset of what I would call positivist social science pushes those questions out. The other reason that these questions are kind of marginal in universities is that there's so much evidence that's actually true and troubling about how small groups don't succeed, except under special circumstances, and how big macro forces, I mentioned Hurricane Katrina, but I could have mentioned the market, or technological change, or population growth, or global warming. These things are seen and found to be the really influential forces in the world. And that's actually, there's a lot of truth to that. My favorite example of that is the way that you can predict very precisely who will win the next presidential election based on the economics situation in the previous year, which means all that decisions about whether the Obama campaign should have done this, or which caucuses or primaries, or the whole thing gets wiped out by the economic forces that determine who's going to be the next president. So, what should we conclude? That Margaret Mead was completely wrong and that none of this stuff matters? No, I think we should conclude that what really matters in life is the work of thoughtful and deliberate citizens, because that's a core moral commitment that we should try to make the world better working with other people. But then it's up to us to figure out how can we make that work more effective. So I bring all that up, that little Margaret Mead exercise, for two reasons. One, because I think that, because you're in the business, Joe, and your colleagues of advanced civic education. And I think when you get to an advanced level, civic education is going past Margaret Mead. It's saying, yes, we want thoughtful and committed citizens to make the world better, but that's going to take asking really tough questions about facts, strategies, and values. It's not automatic. So the never doubt part of her phrase is actually kind of misleading, because you can certainly doubt that thoughtful, committed citizens will succeed, but how can we make them succeed? So that's one reason. I'm just saying that civic education is about this kind of topic. But the second thing is, when I come to visit UIC and I find out about IPCE and the other work, I see a bunch of fairly concrete, definable projects going on. I see community-based research. I see student placements in community-based organizations. I see leadership training. I see youth involved in media production. I see grants being made for discourse and deliberation. I see a website, which is a communications tool. And these are impressive projects. They're cutting edge, some of them very cutting edge, but they are part of broader movements. Similar things are going on in other universities. And I think, so these are not just concrete projects at UIC, these are parts of a bigger movement. So I think we need to ask about that movement. What are its values? What are its strategies? And what facts is it assuming about the world? So what's going on with these movements that drives people to this room to talk about those kinds of concrete activities? So I don't think there's one right answer to that at all, and I don't know what the answers are. But let me suggest, in the next 10 or 15 minutes, a set of things that I think are going on for kind of different people. So as I go around talking to people and reading literature and just having conversations, I think different projects are drawing people into the same kind of work. They have different values, they're worried about different facts, they have different strategies, but several of these pieces might resonate with you. So here's the first one. The first one is a kind of project of improving young people's development, their psychological well-being, their personal success, their thriving or flourishing in life by getting them involved civically. So that's a major force out there that's drawing people into this kind of work. It's the idea that if young people, or maybe people of all ages, because I think there's especially a cluster of work around elders, but if we get people involved in something that we call civic work or civic engagement, they will be better off in terms of their flourishing in life. In short, it's good for them. Why could that be? Actually, let me ask you, I mean, what would be some possible reasons, just quickly, why civic engagement might be good for people's development or psychosocial well-being or flourishing?
It may make them more actively engaged in inquiring and learning about things which will advance their education and cognitive and other skills.
Right. Did everybody hear that? So it'll get you involved in complex thinking, in engaged in applied thinking, and thinking with other people, which will develop your cognitive skills. And we should see that, meaning that you'll do better in school, you'll be able to take more advanced courses and so on. You might also do better in the workforce because you'll have more advanced reasoning abilities. Very plausible. But not the only possible answer. So was there another hand? Yes?
Sense of empowerment.
Uh-huh. So this goes more to the affective side. You could feel like you were consequential, you were important, you had some mastery over your world. So both the knowledge and skills and the affect. Yes?
True social interaction. Actually getting people to realize that they can care for each other without being on the computer or on the iPhone.
Right. Well, we should discuss, you know, at some point whether the iPhone might actually substitute. But definitely, I mean, I'm neutral on that. But definitely the idea that you guys are doing a great job of hitting my bullet points in the same order that I had them on my paper, by the way, which is kind of creepy. But yeah, the idea that you would be networked or interacted with other people who care about you and you would care about them could be good for your development. So, because you can't do civic engagement things completely on your own. So those are the key ones. I think one other might be very concrete, but just exposure to adult ways of life, even careers. We talked about that a little. Students in various IPCE-related programs who end up working for the city of Chicago who wouldn't have known that they could have done that. So those are all reasons. Are any of you familiar with the positive youth development world, PYD? That's interesting. So, which is fine, but it's interesting. I don't think a single person raised their hand. So this is quite an influential movement in thinking about adolescence. And it kind of wraps up all that you were just saying into one pretty forceful program. It says, but it adds a little to it. It says we basically, you know, treat adolescence as, all of them really in a way, as at risk. Adolescence is a dangerous period which can go very badly wrong. And success is basically just making it through adolescence. And so, not out of any malicious intent, but because we care about the kids, we tend to identify the ones who are most at risk and then do various things to intervene to prevent the bad things from happening. But first of all, that doesn't work very well. And secondly, the cumulative message of that could be, you guys have nothing to contribute. The best you can do is survive this period until you act more like us, and there's nothing particularly valuable about what you do. So PYD, positive youth development, turns it around and basically gives the kids distinctive things to do to contribute to make their communities better. And this is a tough-minded research program, and it's led to pretty impressive results. So, you know, one program, early teenage, 13, 14-year-old, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls at risk of pregnancy are given a structured service program. They don't talk much about sexuality or pregnancy, yet their pregnancy rate is cut in half in an experiment, in a randomized experiment. So there's a lot of evidence, and it's building up. And so I would introduce you to PYD. I think it's worth checking out. At a place like this, a university, and a university where not all the students are young, I think there's a lot to still be explored about, because the kind of stresses and psychosocial problems and challenges that your students, or you if you are students, are facing are different from the ones that most of the PYD literature is about. Most of the PYD literature is about the 13-year-old who's highly at risk of gun violence or pregnancy. You've got a bunch of challenges here too, but it's a different set of challenges. And so we actually just don't have that much research about whether college students do benefit psychosocially from being engaged. I think it's very plausible they do, but we don't really know. So try to stick a little to my facts, strategies, values. thing.